Stare into the illusion. The InnerVerse podcast.
Welcome to the One Within All, to another episode of InnerVerse. I'm your host, Chance, and as the harvest season is upon us, it's a perfect time to give thanks for all the goodness in life. One thing I'm extremely thankful for is the amazing community that's entered my life since I began doing this podcast. It's always been my goal to bring the most positive, life-affirming, and solutions-oriented content that I can to this show, along with the more conspiratorial or occult gravy that we serve up here just as often. Although it has become an oddly trendy thing for content creators out there to endlessly emphasize what they and them are doing behind the scenes to mess up life for the rest of us, the top-tier truthers out there who have graduated from the Internet Conspiracy College are the individuals who have realized the first and final truth about existence. My favorite conspiracy theory, you might say, that everything's going to be fine and nobody can stop you from living a healthy and vibrant life. In the online world of black pills and despair purveyors, it's not all that common for community to emerge from the realm of the screen into God's green earth in any meaningful way. But I'm here to tell you that it can happen. And the recent Beartaria National Festival here in Missouri was perhaps the most profound example of the fertility of persistence, positivity, and high morality. Regardless of what you think of Beartaria's most famous figure, Owen Benjamin, the community that his streams and the Beartaria Times social media app has generated is a force that is evolving and growing all on its own. It's a veritable breakaway society at this point. And each year it becomes more and more internally self-sufficient, planting seeds of hope for a healthy future with absolute resilience, regardless of what mainstream society might do. I met many old friends for the first time at that festival, and among them is tonight's guest, Adam Stevens, known to his friends as Mr. Permie Bear. As a former commercial lender turned gentleman farmer, Adam left behind life in the financial services industry to pursue the good, the true, and the beautiful, choosing Missouri in 2019 as his hill to grow on. Adam is a certified permaculture designer, soil science nerd, and co-founder of Grateful Harvest Seed Company, providing the highest quality seeds of all kinds with boundless enthusiasm. From arugula to zucchini, Adam's company can provide you with the beginnings of a grandiose garden or start you on the path to permacultural empowerment. And if you've got time for if all you've got time for right now is a few tomato plants with 47 varieties of maters on his website, I'm sure you can find just the right kind to be the envy of your neighbors, like the dwarf tiger eye, atomic grape, or the highly sought after Jerusalem. Oh, Jesus. But aside from all this, what truly inspired me about meeting Adam last week was the loving vibe that emanated from his booth and his family, and the light in Adam's eyes that only comes out for somebody who has a huge love and enthusiasm for life. Check out gratefulharvestseeds.com, link to the show notes, along with all the other ways you can support InnerVerse and get some cool stuff. So now it's time to get into the gravy with Mr. Permie Bear himself, slinger of superior seeds and guide to your permaculture needs, a true prince among Beartarians. Adam Stevens, welcome to InnerVerse, dude, and thanks for coming on.
Wow, thanks, man. That's quite the intro. I appreciate that.
Got to get them all warmed up, dude.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, dude. So how's it going up there on the top of a hill in a trailer in the middle of the Missouri countryside?
Middle of nowhere. It's great. We might not even get any cars driving by, which will be great. Just, living the dream out here in the middle of nowhere, where cell service is spotty at best and the gravy flows like wine.
So how's the afterglow from the Beartaria Festival treating you? You still
Dude, it's
still
still
riding the
going
wave? Is
strong.
it okay?
Yeah, totally still going strong. Last year I rode the Gravy High for about 2 weeks, and we're what is a week post, and it seems like we're gonna continue that same trend. It's like every time I think about something about the festival and people that I got to hang out with and just get all excited again. My kids still wake up every morning and they're like, my youngest is like, is the festival today again? So this is not just me, it's a whole family thing.
So, man, why don't you tell us a little bit about your life story? What made you bring your family where you're at? You know, how you went from Grabbler adjacent to gardener master. What's up with that?
Man, that's a long story. So where to start? Got involved in the financial services at a very young age. Landed a job as a stockbroker, and had the idea that I was going to be moving to the East Coast to live, a horrible life in the city, chasing the dollar. And my wife, now friend at the time, and I started to date, and I was put her on notice. I'm like, just so you know, I'm leaving like next month, and I'm going to move down to Texas for a little while, see how that goes. But my plan is to kind of keep going. So she came with me, and while we were there, we decided to get married, and we had our first child. And I had this life changing moment of, what am I going to feed this kid? Like, I can't. That's a terrible idea. So that ignited a passion for gardening. We started with a 10 by 10 community garden plot in North Austin, and that lasted about a month until we doubled it to a 20 by 10. And that went on for a few months. And I was like, man, this is great. So I started reading gardening books on my lunch break at work, and, just started to really get into it. And my dad has got some property outside of Austin. And so he kind of gave us the keys to the field, so to speak, and was like, "Yeah, if you guys want to come out here and try some stuff, you're more than welcome to." So we went out on the weekends and tried to do some bigger stuff, and really fell in love with the idea of farming. Um, Enter the horrible Texas drought of, what was that, 2011? It's one of the worst droughts on record, and so we lived through that. We had our first child during that drought, and we were like, this is way too dry. We got to bail. My wife's like, I can't do this again. It was 103 the day that her birthday, April 11th, that we drove down to the San Antonio Zoo to kind of celebrate the baby. And he was born October 11th, and literally every single day between those two dates was over 100 degrees as a high. She's like, I can't do this again pregnant. So we decided to move to the Pacific Northwest. So I quit my job. It was around that time that I decided I didn't want anything to do with the stock market anymore. The positions I had were highly, highly technical, and suffice it to say, I saw things that I couldn't unsee. And so I just needed to jettison myself from that. I just didn't want anything else to do with it. So I started a banking career because somehow that was going to be better. So um, we had an idea that maybe one day we would get some property. And while I was working on the bank, we started buying raw milk from a farm, and he offered an internship. So we broke our lease on our townhome and went and lived on a farm, learning to milk cows. And that didn't last very long before we decided we needed our own place. So we just started looking, and kind of had this idea that we'd get a couple of acres. Well, we ended up with 32 because we got a great deal on a house, and just kind of really went for it, farming wise at that point. I kept studying, kept, you know, expanding my horizons, looking beyond gardening, and started, looking at the works of Joel Salatin and Jean-Martin Fortier, and Elliot Coleman, all the guys doing meat and vegetables. So we kind of started that thing up. And at that same time, I got introduced to permaculture. And so I read the whole permaculture designer manual front to back like a novel, which I don't recommend reading it that way. It's a great resource, really hard to read that way, cover to cover. It's pretty dry at times. But through that, and as I rose up the ranks of the small community bank world, I just had this seed planted in me that we really really needed to get out of debt. And I was running all the numbers. I made great money. Got promoted to a full blown commercial lender, so that came with a lot of perks, nice salary. And no matter how I did the math, I just didn't see any way that that was going to happen in any sort of reasonable time frame. So one day, one of my clients, who's the largest wholesaler of organic dry goods on the West Coast, invited me to lunch at his office, and he and I were sitting down together. And just in the middle of the conversation, he looked over the table and just said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, we're here. We're supposed to be talking about banking, but we're just talking about food forests and permaculture and plans. And he's like, the two worlds in which you find yourself are completely contradictory, and you're squarely on the fence in between those. He's like, so you're gonna one day you're gonna have to pick. You're gonna have to get off that fence. So he said, basically in a nutshell, you either need to put the farm away and resolve yourself to being the best damn banker you can be, which you're really good at, so you're going to excel there, or you need to really devote yourself to the farm and permaculture and this natural life, this simple life you say you want, because you're never going to get that, while you're sitting here, in a bank behind a desk. So it took 2 years after that we finally decided that the time to pursue a more simple life, to get out of debt, and to just try to make our own way was now. So we sold the farm, sold a whole bunch of stuff, and packed up and moved to Missouri. I've got a cousin who lives in the western part of the state, and my mom had moved to Missouri a couple of months prior to that. So with an 8-month pregnant wife and 3 kids in tow, we just went for it, and the rest is kind of history.
Thank you for the whole rundown of that tale. Because one of the things I started this show about, like a main reason I started the show, was because I wanted to figure out how people did the whole leap of faith, getting off the fence part. I was like, maybe if I interview enough people that are living their actual true soul's purpose in life without a safety net, maybe one of them will be able to give me the key.
Yeah.
It turns out there's no one that can exactly give you the key, but I do want to ask you the question, do you have any advice out there for people on the fence? Maybe, were there any unseen forces that came to your aid when you made the leap of faith that maybe wouldn't have shown up if you hadn't jumped off the cliff?
Oh, for sure. For sure. And it was actually those unseen forces that pushed me off the fence to begin with. So, I've got this whole theory, and it is just a theory. But I fully believe that the reason that we're here is 100% because of God. And so the theory that I've got is that you can either listen to what it is he wants you to do, or he can make it so painful for you to not listen that eventually you will. And that, unfortunately, is the route that I had chosen. We had somebody who was really interested in the house, and so the day that they were bringing their brother back to come look at it, I got promoted, and this was the promotion I've been waiting for 3 years. And so I called him up and bailed on him and was like, "Hey, I'm really sorry, but I just got promoted. We're gonna see how this rides its course." Despite the strong feelings that I had that I shouldn't do that. And so basically, like, what the result was is that professionally my work environment became so um, hostile, is the easiest way to describe that, that I basically, for my sanity, I had to leave. We had acquired a whole other lending team as a result of a bank merger. So we overnight hired like 14 people. And we ended up, my boss and I, who started that particular branch, got siloed. And, it was made very clear that we weren't part of their team at all. And so it forced him into retirement early, which is, that's its own thing. And, got me the promotion, but it was so difficult to be surrounded by people that just A, you didn't have anything in common with, and B, you just, wanted nothing to do with you. And so when that got painful enough, I was like, all right, it's time. Screw this. I'm done. And if I'm quitting, I'm moving. So we got the house back on the market. I took a job temporarily at another bank because I just had to get out of there. But I was like, well, if I'm upending my whole professional career, then let's just burn it all and let's just go, because this is BS. So I guess pain and pleasure, right? So for people looking to make that leap, I would say, you just gotta do it. And what I've learned is that it's really a lot scarier than what you think it is. Our whole plan here in Missouri has changed a dozen times over. And so, pursuing what you actually want without regard for the consequences is really my best piece of advice, because, once you take that leap of faith and once you're all in, you're going to find a way. God's going to provide a way for you to make it or not. And that's something I think people need to be prepared for, is that we make our best plans and you take your leap of faith, but realize that what you think you want may not actually be what you want. You may not realize that until you actually tried to pursue that, but you're never going to know unless you try.
I totally relate. what what I would say about like the role of God in all this, apart from being, the creator of all things, the you could look at it like as a way to help you with the mental juggling of how do I get off this fence, that when you're on the fence, or when you're doing something you don't like or that is harmful to your soul, seeing things you can't unsee in the finance world, or what have you, you're doing it because you feel compelled to. Like there's no other
Mhm.
choice. Like it's a survival thing. And basically that entire charade that you're playing out is telling God, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. I think I gotta do it this way, because
Yeah.
otherwise I'm not gonna make it. I don't trust you. Well, when you
Mhm.
are in faith is a very key component of the whole leap of faith. When you're
Totally.
doing what resonates with you, what is biologically appropriate for you, what is moral and ethical and good and best for your family, that's regardless of, if it's going to be hard or you don't know exactly how it's going to work out. You're telling God, you're telling life, I trust that doing the right thing for the sake that it's right, regardless of what I think may or may not be the outcome or reward. That's
Mhm.
that's actual faith. It's not lip service like I believe in Jesus or I believe in that or this. It's faith is an action. Faith
Totally.
is an action, or it's a refrain from certain actions in a sense too. But at the end of the day, that's what you got to do is you got to tell life, you got to tell God, I trust that the right thing will happen and that only the right thing happens. So I'm going to do my part to do the right thing. And then we'll let the chips fall where they may, but we're going to survive.
Totally. I think just being willing to stick your foot out there and see what that next step feels like, whether you stumble or whether you run, that's the big thing. Like you said, it's trust. I spent so much of my life, and it's something that I still battle, and I'm sure that we all do, thinking that we have it figured out, that we have the next 4 or 5 steps figured out. And if only this thing would happen, or only these set of circumstances would happen, then, we'll get to that next level where we really want. But that again takes us out of a trusting position and, puts us back into our will and, our goals, and not being open to what, the Lord really has in store for us, because we're going to spend so much time trying to force these things that you're thinking of, that, like you said, you don't actually have that trust, you don't actually have that faith. And how far is that really going to take you, both from a physical, like where you get to, but a spiritual and emotional aspect too, is when you get frustrated and things aren't working despite your best efforts. You can start to blame yourself at that point. And I think that that's where a lot of depression and stuff comes from, is that people think that they're wholly reliant on their will and their abilities, and they have no trust in that someone's got them, that God's got your back, and that he's not going to just abandon you to whatever happens.
Right. I don't know the exact verse, but there's somewhere, I think maybe in the book of Matthew, where Jesus is saying something along the lines of like, you think that you're different than the bird or than the, it's probably not squirrel, but think like whatever animal out there that you see that is living the way that God made them, and they keep living, keep existing. So I do this modality called Biofil Tuning with tuning forks, work with people's frustration issues all the time and their like lack of satisfaction with life, which is actually a big part of what blocks the ability to get that receptivity to the abundance that nature and God are always offering. Right. And there's even like a guilt aspect to this too. But what I like to explain to people is this is a perfect creation. Every organism is perfectly tuned to the environment it's in, and the environment responds to the organisms that are in it, so that no matter what, everything that is needed for that organism to survive and thrive will be present in the environment they're in, within the range of their perception. You see what I mean? Like, so we're no different than that. But when we're playing in the artificial world, we're playing in the corporate Babylon world, there's all these illusions set up and constant messaging set up to make you afraid that what you need is not available in your environment. But the funny thing is, even in that environment, artificial as it is, this still applies. It's just about being clear enough to see the opportunities and being faithful enough to take the opportunities. But let's talk about some because this has been really good. This is what I want people to hear, this type of messaging, and help whoever is ready right now to get off the fence to do that. But I do want to let's talk some permaculture, but I really want to know, how has learning about permaculture and maybe practicing it affected your life outside of the garden? That's something I'm wondering.
A lot, in every way you can possibly imagine. I think one of the biggest things on a day-to-day basis is that I see the patterns in nature everywhere, and it doesn't matter what it is. And it could be a physical pattern, like a dendritic pattern of, say, a tree or a river. Or the other day, we grew these really rare tomatillos, and I peeled off the flesh, and the pulp on the inside, where all the seeds are, look like a morel. And it's like, whoa, there's another pattern. But it's beyond the physical patterns. There's behavioral patterns. There's spiritual patterns. There's all kinds of things that fit in that. And a big part of permaculture is the study of patterns and pattern recognition, because it's through the application of those patterns that we're able to achieve more than what we had thought that we could do. The patterns which God has given us, or as a lot of people would say, the patterns observed in nature, like that's your template. And I fully believe that most things fit into a pattern or a template, and our job really is to understand which ones, so that we can then apply that. And if you understand the template, and you understand what other things share that same pattern, now you can start to mix and match things. Now you can get into function stacking, and it goes, it's so much more beyond gardening, right? Like, for example, so we have the seed company. I'm also co-founder of a construction company, Ozark Legacy Contracting. And then I have my permaculture, design stuff. And then we have our own personal farm. And so
the contractor company, that's with Gardner, right?
no, that's it's with a couple of the other.
But
Ozark
he's
guys.
training you guys on some stuff. Am I
Yes.
right about that? Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
I knew he had some
Yeah,
involvement. Topher
yeah,
is a
so
huge
we were
homie.
looking at doing some domes and doing some other stuff together. So yeah, there is definitely an overlap. But so going to the pattern thing, you look at the ways that things overlay and interface, and one of the patterns is that everything has an output and an input. So if you look at the relationship between the things that I do personally and the things within the business, the inputs and outputs are all connected, theoretically. So for example, if somebody were to hire me to come build a house for them, right? And it's rural, so that opens up a conversation to, well, what are you going to do with your land? Now maybe we'll talk about permaculture design, doing a design for them. And then that leads into, well, what are you going to do with your garden? And so then that leads into seeds. How are you going to connect things in the meantime, so you have possibility of farm products there? You have greenhouses, you have other people that you can connect with them through your network. And so suddenly you start to see that none of these things are one standalone entity, that they are all connected, and there's a system and a feedback loop that can happen between all of these things. And so that's that permaculture thinking. The other big part of that is function stacking. I'm always looking for, well, what else can I do? If I'm going to do this thing anyway, what else can I do with that to get a benefit? And one really easy one that I like to encourage people with a lot is, if you have hobbies, things you're going to do anyway, how do you turn those into a business? How do you make a side hustle from that? So now that not only are the expenses that you're incurring while you're doing those activities tax deductible, theoretically, but also you've taken this thing that was just interesting to you, and now you've turned it into a potential income source. And so I like to try to make everything that I have that's a hobby, or every piece of specialized equipment I own, how do I structure a business around that so that I can function stack with this thing that I was going to do anyway?
I kind of do that too. Pretty much everything I'm doing on a day-to-day basis is either like, well, there's a potential that pretty much everything I do that I would do anyway could potentially generate income for me. So I think that that's almost like a outcome of doing what you actually feel resonant in your soul about. That even stuff that you're pursuing just because it's like super fun or interesting, if you keep going down that path and keep putting in the time, it's as opposed to putting in the time on Netflix or something, it can grow into something that becomes fruitful. That's the
Totally.
beauty of this world. There's fruit everywhere. It's all fruit.
Yes.
Okay. So I want to talk about the seeds, Grateful Harvest Seed Company. Let's talk
Yeah.
about, I mean, I honestly didn't even know there were 50 varieties of tomatoes
Oh,
possible.
there's so many more than that.
So, okay, a good place to start actually would be to have you maybe riff on a bit with the, same subject matter that you gave us a speech about at the Beartaria Festival.
Okay.
That was a really great presentation. Got me super fired up for the possibility of having you on as a guest. And that, you don't have to necessarily re-encapsulate that entire speech, but if you could provide us with a window into that gravy portal that you opened that day, I'd love that.
Sure. So, when you're trying to learn about farming and you're trying to learn more about gardening and you're looking to take things to the next level, I find that people go, one of two ways. You either go the chemical route, like what chemicals, what, petroleum-based fertilizers, what newfangled technology can I put on these plants in order to increase my yields, make everything better. The other way that people go with that is, what can I do naturally that's gonna help me get to that next level. And for me, where that ultimately led is soil and really understanding what is soil. And that's still, an enigma. And when you get into that realm, there's so many people involved in that it can be kind of hard to sort things out. And so through lots and lots of research, lots and lots of studying, I came across Matt Powers, who's is like my favorite soil permaculture guy. And he's really been on the cutting edge with taking all of these like concepts out there that different people had in different areas, like Elaine Ingham, who's got like the soil food web, and like John Kemp, who's super into photosynthesis and complete photosynthesis. And then you know uh, uh, Chris Trump, who's all into Johnson Soup compost and making a whole bunch of preps or whatever. So he um, assembled a lot of this stuff and wrote a book called Regenerative Soil, and that was like a game changer for me, because it was the first time that I'd ever seen a publication that laid down the groundwork of, like, here's the nitrogen cycle, here's the carbon cycle, this is the cobalt cycle, right? So it goes into all of the chemistry, nerdy stuff that is kind of fun to get down to. But then he goes into this whole like back part of the book is all like, here's what you can do on your own. And he starts getting into like biochar, bioinoculants, liquid plant foods, liquid fertilizers. And it's like, wow, there's like a lot that you can do here. This is really exciting. And so through those individual little pieces, then you start to assemble a more cohesive view of this beautiful creation that we've been given. And these, I hate to call them laws, but because they might not be, but these systems that God has engineered. And so you start to learn about the system and learn about how it can work if you address all of the components of the system appropriately. And then you start to get into like, well, what's theoretically possible with this, and some of the things that are theoretically possible would be like taking crops that take months to mature and compressing that window down to a period of weeks. Topher gave a really great example on one of his podcasts. Dan, I think, was the guy down in Costa Rica who, is big into biochar. And so he's growing all these different plants and these durian trees, and Topher was telling me that, he knows people that have planted these trees 12 years ago and they're just now barely getting 50 feet tall. Well, this other guy planted them, and in 2 years they were 50 feet tall. And so it's like, whoa, what's going on? Right? Like that's incredible. But it's not just the trees. And so you start looking at that and say, okay, well, why is it working? Is it just the biochar? And it's not. And that's the really interesting thing. It's this whole realm of interconnected things that are so small but yet so large. And so if you want to connect all of those things, instead of starting with like, why is my plant sick? You got to go way, way, way down and say, are my microbes healthy? And you can start at the bacteria and the fungi level, because everything's a food chain. So if your bacteria and your fungi aren't healthy because either there's an imbalance, they don't have what they need, they're not, being able to complete their life cycle in a good amount of time, then the things that eat those are going to be deficient. And then the things that eat those are going to be deficient, and so on and so forth. And by the time that it gets up to us, we're deficient. Our food is deficient. And how can you ever achieve true health in your genetic, uh, the full expression of your genetic capabilities if you yourself don't have what you need? And so what really got me excited when I heard some of the things that were possible is like, you mean to tell me that we can grow nutrient dense food in a fraction of the time, have yields that are 2 to 3 times higher than what would be agreed upon as like typical, and we can kick epigenetics up to the next level. My genes can fully express themselves. I can capture true health, but now I can also pass that on to my children. And imagine what they could be if they had everything that they needed, from a nutritional perspective and a genetic perspective, and then their
From the
children
beginning.
from the beginning.
Yeah.
But what gets even crazier about that, like this is already like gravy, right? But what gets even crazier about that is when you're starting to look at all of those little bits and pieces, the biota in the soil, everything has a frequency, right? Every living thing has a frequency. So all of the things within your soil that make up the soil are no different than that. We're no different than that. We have a frequency. Every place on this earth has its own frequency to go with that. And so to kind of sidestep just a minute, if you're getting food trucked in from the West Coast or from Chile or wherever, what's coming in, not only is it nutritionally depleted, it's mostly water, it's picked at the wrong times, everything we know already that's wrong with, quote unquote commercial food, right? We're already getting that. But now you add into there that it doesn't have what you need from a frequency or energetic perspective because it's from a different place. So you're eating this thing that now does not have the same resonance as the environment in which you find yourself. And so now you're not getting a good biofeedback loop, because the thing you do 3 times a day is giving you information, both nutritionally and energetically, from a place that you're not even at, and your body's like, whoa, what am I trying to do here? Like, how do I adjust to this environment? You're constantly creating a disharmony energetically within that, within your body as a result of that. So stepping back into the original line of thought, so you get your biology right, now you have changed the resonance of the organisms within that by giving them what they need, by getting the right ratios. Think of like a crowd of people. If you have a male female ratio at the simplest form, if you're overly male, you're going to have a masculine energy. If you're overly feminine or overly female, you're going to have a feminine energy. Like, there's a good mix somewhere in the middle there, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. And so you get the same thing within the soil, where like you've got your right mix of all of the different little components in there, and now it's waking up, right? And so you have your local energetics, you have now your soil energetics. You're taking those things into your body just from being there and from eating that food. Now you're in harmony with your environment, and theoretically with everything happening in the cosmos as well. So now you have nutrition, you have genes taken care of, but now you've also taken care of energetics. Now, what would that look like for us? What would that look like for our children, our grandchildren? Are we talking like we're back to 120 years as the life given to man? Are we talking like Methuselah? Like what is the boundary, right? Because if we don't have disharmonics, and if we don't have nutritional vacancies, then we can truly be at ease and get rid of dis-ease. So what's possible, when you go through and you take all of the appropriate steps with your soil, and you address everything from the bottom layer all the way up, and you make sure that everybody has everything that it needs, diseases go away, pests go away, imbalances, it's all gone. So you just have these plants that are just like crushing. We can do the same thing, and it all starts at that lowest level. Another thing that was an epiphany for me a couple of weeks ago, as I was thinking about that, the highest quality, most expensive probiotics on the market are soil based. So if you look at like what it takes for us to be, living, like how do we take up food? Like we have our digestive system, but that's all reliant on microbes in order to break that food down and be able to uptake the nutrients. So if the probiotics that we most need are found in soil, which enable us to digest and uptake our food, if that's where they are, then it's really easy to see how you can have the opinion that we were made from the soil, which is just like mind-blowing, right? It's literally, we are made of those organisms. Without those, we would cease to live. And so sometimes I'll go into like an undisturbed part of the forest where there's like really good soil, and I'll kind of like move the leaf stuff out of the way, and I'll just like grab some soil and just pack a lip of it, and, instead of spitting, I'm swallowing. And it's just this great way to re-inoculate yourself as you've been exposed through a variety of things that just tend to destroy your biology. And I think that's a cornerstone of health and energetics, really.
Man, thank you for that. That's just like flow state. Let's ladle.
Yeah. The ladles are dip.
I think you really have to get to a new and better life and new and better world. You got to be able to imagine what's possible beyond where you're at. So that's what I really love about everything that you just explained, because there's somebody out there, their mind just expanded. What they could conceive of as possible just went up a few notches. And that's literally required to have change and positive evolution in life. It's the in the rat race, distracted, 24/7, exhausted, unhealthy, sick. That's the world where it's been crafted, and we do it to ourselves because we're afraid of our own success. I won't blame it all on theys. Theys are the thems out there are exactly like the pests that come onto the plant to do some cleanup for something that's out of balance. Everything parasitic seems to work that way. But I'm wondering, what does the world look like when we fix the soil on a more universal level, widespread level?
Yeah.
Not just the humans. Like, what are the animals going to be like? Are they going to be, communicating with us? Are they going to become more intelligent? Are we going to have like, are we going to actually know some bears, like physical, literal bears, and have some relationship with them?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, what is possible? The full expression of the Garden of Eden here. could be
Totally.
incredible.
Yeah, and I really think that that's on the table because it's not just our health, right? It's definitely the health of our animals, and we know that our mental capacity is retarded if we don't have what we need nutritionally, energetically. Like how many people struggle with depression? Well, that's fixed by the soil. Like that's an imbalance in your biome, and through interactions with living soil you take those in and it can fix that imbalance, right? So, have you ever seen a depressed cow, right? Like, obviously, like a feedlot, but I notice it in my animals, they get moods. And, some of them are kind of retarded. So, like, if they had everything that they needed, absolutely, I think that we would see traits manifest and behaviors manifest that we can't even imagine. And would we have verbal communication? I don't know. That'd be rad. But
I
I
mean,
really
I
think
heard a story of an orangutan driving a car,
dude,
the other day,
that's
or it might have
awesome.
been a chimpanzee or something. But there's, I think that spark of, I think the spark of life is the same thing as intelligence. I think that
Yeah.
you're like the flow and amount of energy in your system versus the constriction and stagnancy of energy in your system is exactly the function of your intelligence. That's the same. It's
Yes.
the same. It's a direct correlation. It's exactly the same. I think that applies to all creatures. So,
Yeah.
sky's the limit. But you brought up Matt Powers. Love that guy.
Hmm.
Had him on a couple times. I was actually, I was already hatching in my mind that it would be fun sometime to have you and Powers on a stream together after
That'd be
we'd
rad.
had you on one-on-one. So let's put that into the imagination portal and see what comes out. But
Yeah.
there's so many cool things that he gets into. I love the idea that the soil could be holding the genetic information of things that might even be extinct in like a dormant way,
Yeah.
and that there's something about soil that is the preserver of life in the realm, even if there's some kind of external extinction event, that it can come back. It comes out of the soil, from dust
Yeah.
to dust. That
Yeah.
part is really
Dude,
cool. And then one other thing
yeah.
I want to put out there is he talks about pleomorphism of bacteria,
Uh-huh.
and that applies to our gut as well. Our gut bacteria, pleomorphism, meaning it can change from one to another. It's like most of these bacteria are like a universal chassis that can alter based on the situation that's needed, rather than like,
Hmm.
what you'd consider distinct species of bacteria. It's more like bacteria is this amorphous thing that evolves. It expresses its epigenetic changes in the same, because the culture is so quickly changing, breeding and dying off, I guess, but it just like literally morphs into something else. So
Yeah.
we can alter our gut bacteria with things like
Hmm.
frequency. We can do it with improving our, like, it's mind blowing, but feelings like frustration, resentment, guilt, and shame, when they're undigested, your gut biome, as in you haven't processed it, your gut biome actually changes to be more
Hmm.
difficult to digest food. You have problems
Yeah.
with physical digestion when that happens. So I'm wondering, like what what we could do with things like pleom or frequency with the soil, not just to
Yeah.
alter the bacterial expression, like maybe some very simple ways, but is that like healing the earth as an organism
Hmm.
of its emotional blockages? Because I look at the whole realm under our feet as a living being, not just dead
Hmm.
soil. It's
Oh,
alive.
for sure. Yeah. I think man, you gave me goosebumps. We did go to that. Like, that really resonated. I think that you're 100% onto that, onto something there. So there's a couple of things. The soil retaining the genetic memory, if you will. So we know now that there is a thing that happens called horizontal gene transfer between all kinds of different life forms. Like plants will do a horizontal gene transfer with fungi, right? And so it's this genetic information that doesn't even belong to them, that is information coming into them about their environment, their surroundings, that allows them to then take next steps. And so if you have like living soil, and if you look at that as an information superhighway, you could have these horizontal gene transfers that could be going on, passing genetic material and information from things that are long dead, but that resonance is still there. Now, the other really interesting thing that you're really onto something there, is the memory of the soil. So your main your main components. So your main physical characteristics of soil, the things that make up soil, is you have clay, silt, and sand. All soils are based off of a combination of those things. Loam, for example, is like what you want, and that is mostly um, silt and sand. I think I don't. That's not really important. So, but what is important is that the primary component that makes up each of those three macro components of soil is silica. And what do we do with silica? Computer chips, processors. Silica has to our knowledge, the highest ability to store energy and information. And it's so if your bits of silica are connected through living organisms, through mycorrhizal fungi and other things, there you go. There you go, right there. That's a repository of energy and information.
Some
So
genuine Arkansas quartz. We're just littered with it in this part of the world.
that's awesome. Yeah, grind that up and put it out over the fields, get biodynamic prep going on. I think that that's related to it. There's a spray that you do with quartz, a foliar spray at certain times. And I think that the reason that that's done is the silica, for its ability to transmit and capture information and energy. So if you have this big network that is spread out, you basically have like all these little processors within the soil, this repository of information that could go back to the beginning of time. And it's just being able to tap into that. And then the thing that, I don't know how much validity there is to this, but it really
I've
makes
never
sense
thought
in my
about it in
mind.
the silica level being part of what stores the information from organisms, but that makes so much sense. It does.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And then like I had a lot of conversations with people at the festival about electroculture. It's a big hot topic right now because it's seems to be something there, and people get really good results with that. So I've been really thinking like, well, what is that? How does that relate to all of this? I'm like, okay, well, if you're basically have a computer in the soil, microprocessor galore, and you like jam this copper wire in there and you connect it to the ether, now it's getting that much more energy and information. Like that's going from battery powered single CPU to like plug in Bitcoin mining machines that are just like these crazy
Are you using
systems.
electroculture?
Not yet. I've been really on the fence with like, okay, so yes, but no. So
That damn fence again.
I know, right? So with copper wire, no, but I have so anything that is conductive can give you a lot of the benefits of electroculture. It just turns out that copper wire is like the best at it. And so I've noticed for a really long time that the tomatoes and cucumbers that we grow on cattle panels do a lot better than anything else. And I think that a big part of that is whatever interaction is happening as a result of electroculture, is because I got these T-posts down in the ground. I've got this metal mesh basically secured to the T-post with wire, and these plants growing up through them. And so, for the longest time, I thought it was just, oh, well, it's airflow. It's a good trellis situation, but it's really so much more than that. And I really think that there is an enormous amount of information that we don't really know that we have access to that could change the world as we know it if we were just able to get all of our ducks in a row and to get everything together. Um, I think one of the really interesting things to me about being human is I believe that we can be the greatest force for destruction or the greatest force for good. It's just how do we use these, right? How do we employ those things? And so if we set our mind to we're going to understand as best we can these systems, we're going to address these issues in our soil, therefore address it within our animals and within ourselves and our subsequent generations. What could the world look like 20 years from now? What about 50 years from now? Like, we could have superpowers, like we just don't know.
With a comment about the information in the soil, one of the things that seems abstract about that is like, well, how do you get, because we're thinking in terms of like computer technology, how do you get the file from the crystalline hard drive to, the screen where we can read what's on it, right?
Yeah.
But that's us thinking in the terms of like our artificial world. And what I have come to understand about, again, through my work using the tuning forks to balance people's energy fields, is that what really is important is that the parts are connected and able to communicate with each other. And when that is established, when we don't have all these like blockages and inner schisming that causes because this is what transhumanism is about. Transhumanism is about trying to get the human being to route all of its processes through a central processor like computers do. Mm-hmm. But our bodies are not meant to operate that way. At the point where they're going to want to be implanting things into your body and, having things that control your physiology through remote means, obviously stay far away from that. But, your body though, like your pinky is connected to your ear, is connected to your toe. Like you learn this from looking at reflexology, how there's points on your feet. You can stimulate with electricity or vibration or massage a certain point on your foot, and it's going to open up your lung capacity, or it's going to help your liver function. It's all connected. Every point is connected to every other part. So if we have properly established the connectivity or the communication network for soil, for example, and so how we have it in our body is when there's memory, that is it, your energy field is your memory. And when when I find something that is a problematic memory or stuck emotion in somebody's energy field, and I tell them, about when it was and about what it felt like or what the belief was related to, the memory of what it was that actually happened, it comes in like that. It just boom, they instantly recall it. So I'm thinking, this must apply to the information or the memory that's in the soil too, that in the moment when it is needed, when it's appropriate, when it's called for, then that information comes up. It's not like a file archive database where you can just go browsing through and be like, okay, pull this up now. But it's an intelligent network, just like our biology is, where the information will emerge when it's needed if everything's connected. So, that's the epiphany I just had about like, what are we talking about when we say that there's information in the crystal, in the soil? I think that's what we're talking about. Just like memory in our energy field comes up when it's needed, it pops in, we all of a sudden recall it. I think that that's how life could re-express itself out of the soil when the conditions are right. Because this happens, man. Like, I know this guy, Mitch, who has been putting scalar energy devices or orgone devices all over Arizona and putting them around the cell phone towers as a way to improve the frequency environment for the entire state. And it started monsooning there. And now their monsoon season for years has been huge. And they're getting more rain for the last years than they ever did. And so there's these little organisms that are coming out of the soil, like they call them dinosaur shrimp, that were thought to be extinct or not part of that bioregion or whatever. And Now that the conditions have changed in the region because it's getting rain again, these things are just emerging. They're just showing up in the ground, and people are like, where did this come from? So that's to me, and there's other examples of this even with bigger organisms, like even big cats starting to show up in places where you wouldn't expect them. So it's like when you're not looking, it's like stuff just pops in. It's so crazy.
Yeah, or like thermophils in your hot compost. Like, where do those come from? And I think that, yeah, you're totally right. It's probably better to call that an intelligence as opposed to, just classifying it as information that, how do we access that? I think it's your inner knowing. And I think it's that knowing that all organisms have that allows, things to come back, whether they spontaneously emerge because the information was there. Maybe it's like those the bacteria that we thought were the same, and we're just this one typecast, but it all turns out that they can adapt based on conditions. Is it something similar to that, where based on the conditions, the building blocks come together and these things can now emerge? Or, are they spontaneously created, or were they dormant? Like, we don't know. But I do think that intelligence is the right way to describe that. And it's there, and I think only when we are in a place that we can interact with that, that we can access things that we didn't know. So maybe this is like epiphanies, maybe this is inspirations, all of these things, to where you're like, well, how did I know that? Maybe that's where that's coming from, is that intelligence, that information that is lying latent, that is just waiting to have conditions created that it can maybe transmit. If you're living in like Monsanto country that has dead soil, you're not going to get that information, versus like how many people have gone out to rainforests or old growth forests or things like that, and they've had these like massive spiritual awakenings. Well, maybe that's that intelligence. Like, you finally have gotten to a place where you can interact with and, almost absorb that. Like, I don't know if it's osmosis or, whatever it is, but you're able to actually take up and use some of that. And it can look at any number of ways. I think you're right on.
It's an energy thing, to put it simply. I'm sure you've had this experience, right? Where you have some knowledge about who you are, or some philosophy about life that unlocks in an epiphany type way. You put it into action. You're living that way. You're like, I just know this in my bones. And then your health dips. You get more stressed. You have some other distractions come into your life. Your energy wanes and you forget all of those epiphanies. And then finally you kind of get yourself back up to a level of balance and energetic vibrancy and vitality. And all of a sudden it's like, poof, you remember those epiphanies and you're like, how did I ever forget that? Why wasn't I putting that into practice? How did I forget? Because like the Greek philosophers said, I'm pretty sure all learning is remembering. And I think, the soil is the exact same way. The healthier we can get the soil, and the more energetically connected and powerful we can get the soil, and this applies to the plants too, the more it will remember about how to best express what it's here to express.
Totally.
Yeah.
And what if like the only way to take up certain parts of that intelligence is to eat it? Like, and so we're missing out on this whole, layer of gravy, because it's supposed to come to us through the things that we eat, but yet we've disrupted that pathway. So, I mean, there's another possible vector right there. But yeah, I think energy is definitely the best way to describe that. And there's any number of ways which energy is transmitted through a system. Some of it's direct contact, some of it's proximity. I think it's exactly the same thing. It's just what type of information, and then what things did we know as individuals, as well as just humans, that we've forgotten because we're not there. We've just gone away from that.
Oh, we're far in the gravy ocean right now. Somebody throw us a life raft. We got to take our intermission, man. So can you tell people where they can find your seed company, what you got to offer there, and if there's any way that they can follow you or connect with you that you want to offer?
Sure.
And closing thoughts for the free hour, all of that.
Okay. So you can find us at gratefulharvestseeds.com. We've got somewhere around 230 varieties of vegetables, flowers, and herbs. They're all open pollinated or heirloom. Most of them are organic, and there's quite a few of them, especially in the tomato realm, that we grow ourselves here on our farm. We're going to be launching a YouTube channel at some point once I can free up a little bit of time. Right now, we have a Twitter account that is neglected. A lot of time on the Beartaria Times app as well, so that'd be a great place for people to connect with us.
Yeah, man, we haven't even really got into the community aspect, or because that's so inspirational, or the family aspect. I know that you're a great father and husband. Those are all things I'm interested in, as well as talking more about seeds themselves. So apparently there's a lot of goodness on the table here. People can find the second hour of this show on Rockfin, and we'll be streaming live, and you'll also be able to get it after we end on Patreon. So all that's going to be linked in the show notes. I just posted it in the chat for people here live. We're going to take a few minutes of intermission musical break, listen to an awesome song by Permie Bear, also known as I Love, and he performed at the Beartaria National Festival. I was very excited about his set. The message in his music got me all fired up. It's exactly the type of thing I would want to put into music if I was making music. And as Adam said, he's a savant. So enjoy this track. It's very appropriate. It's called Lightning, all about that energy. And we'll see everybody later who's just a free listener. And thank you to the supporters who are already chatting on the Rockfin side. Looking forward to going deeper with Mr. Permie Bear. And thanks for being here, man. See you on the other side.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm looking for a switch to the light bulb. Wanna turn it on up above my head. Pour ideas into my mind all the way full. Help me find the words that I haven't heard said. Light up all the pathways, illuminate the map. Start me on the right foot and keep me on the path. Help me find the gold, yeah, show me where it's at. Help me find a sound that I know will last. Endless possibilities. Harness all the energy. Inspiration pulsing through me. Creativity, yeah, looking for a piece to the puzzle. Try to find a one that'll fit just right. Yeah, I'm looking up and down. Yeah, I'm looking side to side. Yeah, I'm looking all around for another insight. It's something you can't force when you're looking for a line. When you're looking for a rhythm or you're looking for a rhyme. I hope I'm in the right place at the right time. Yeah, I hope I'm right there where the lightning strikes. Endless possibilities. Harness all the energy. Inspiration pulsing through